Thursday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little bit later, we will be joined by 92.3 The Fan's Daryl Ruiter. We'll talk some Cavs, some Indians, and some Browns with Daryl. He's the beat reporter for all three of the Cleveland professional teams. We're also going to start by talking Browns with BrownsWire.com's Jeff Risdon. Let's welcome Jeff in. And Jeff, a tweet from Albert Breer, and take a look at this and let's dive into it. Albert Breer tweeted out the teams with the most salary cap available, and this was as of yesterday morning. So you look at it, and with all the Browns have done in free agency, still sixth most salary cap available, over $20 million. What do you make of that? How important is that? That speaks to me that, you know, Andrew Berry in the front office is doing a great job here.
They definitely haven't paralyzed themselves with moves, and I think that's very important. The fact that they're being prudent with how they're spending things, that's a good thing. And they're actually now fifth because the Detroit Lions signed Penei Sewell, their first-round pick yesterday. That took them down. So the Browns have actually moved up a little bit in that. So, yeah, it's a good sign. It gives them some flexibility to do some things if they want to, when they want to. If they don't, they have options with that too. But yeah, there's still a lot of spending to be done if they want to do it, and they have the funds to do it, and that's a very important thing. You look down at the other end of the spectrum there. There's a lot of teams that are very strapped. You know, if they want to do anything at all, they're going to have to make some cuts. The Browns are not in that situation. That's a very good place for them to be right now.
And correct me, you can roll over unused salary cap, and that becomes important for the Browns because you know what's waiting ahead of them as far as contracts that need to be extended and deals that need to be done.
Absolutely, there are some players that are going to have their hands out this coming off season, or perhaps even now, and the ability to roll that money over if you don't use it, so you can swallow a bigger cap hit next year with some of the extensions that may or may not be coming. Yeah, that's huge. Again, that makes it so you don't have to cut players necessarily to sign other players and keep other players. That's if you follow what happens with the New Orleans Saints, they wind up having to cut a lot of players every year because they've paid so much to the players that are there. You know, they can't afford to keep them all together. Thus far, Andrew Berry and the Browns have done a very good job of budgeting for, you know, planning ahead, absorbing Myles Garrett's extension without having to make any significant cuts to it, and being able to sign guys like Jack Conklin and Anthony Hooper, or Austin Hooper rather, and you know, fitting them in again without having to make cuts. That's huge. Now, it gets tougher the more good players that you have, and that's a good problem to have. And the Browns are right at that problem now with some guys who are going to need some money soon.
When you look at a guy that's coming up quickly is Nick Chubb. Do you think they try to get that done quickly? It isn't like Ward and Baker because there's no fifth-year extension. That only comes with first-round picks. It's important to couch it that way. Chubb was not a first-round pick. There is not that fifth-year option that you can pick up. Do you think they try to get that done sooner rather than later?
I do. I think that it behooves them to get it done sooner than later because the price tag is only going to go up. If he plays the way that we all expect him to play, and as long as he's healthy, he's going to have another great season that says, hey, I'm one of the two or three best running backs in the NFL. You need to pay me as such. If you lock that in now, that price tag stays relatively contained. You're still somewhat in control of what you can pay him. Just based on the market dynamics, he's going to be looking at $12 to $13 million a year. That's a lot for a running back. But if he winds up, rushing for, 4.8 yards per carry, scoring 10 touchdowns, rushing for 1,500 yards with the extra game, even it could go even higher than that. The price tag is only going to go up to the 14 or 15 million per year range. So getting it done now is important. One thing with running backs, you don't lock them up for as long as you would Baker or Denzel at the other positions, because running back does have a very high attrition rate. They do burn out quickly. We all hope and pray that doesn't happen with Chubb, but the fact of the matter is, look what happened with Todd Gurley in the Rams. They signed him to a great extension. He was phenomenal, and then the knee gave out. Not saying that will happen with Nick Chubb, but you do have to insure yourself against that. So I think it's going to be a shorter extension. It's not going to be the 5 or 6 year deal like what Ezekiel Elliott got. This is going to be a 3, maybe a 4 year deal, maybe a 2 year deal with some void years on it to make. Again, the void years are a very big thing. That's one of the reasons why they have some cap room available. Expect to see that if in any in any Chubb extension this offseason.
The other thing is there's going to be more salary cap room when the TV deal hits. The additional revenue is coming in the billions of dollars. So it's Andrew Berry and the Browns have done a nice job. They're playing a game of three-dimensional movements here with the roster this year, next year, and what we have to do in the future. And so far, you can see how they're lining up the pieces.
Absolutely. The cap is going to go up. How much, we don't know yet, but it's going to go up a lot. The ratings that are back, Sunday Night Football was the #1 rated program on all of television last year. Tells you that there's still opportunity for growth. It's still the world's most popular sport in terms of viewers, certainly in North America anyways. And with the games are going to be back in London this year. They're going to be trying to expand beyond that, in coming seasons now that the global pandemic seems to be abetting a little bit. So, yeah, there's going to be more revenue coming in, and that allows a bubble, and it allows the Browns to spend in that bubble because they are going to have additional cap room. Cash flow is not a problem for this team. That's a good thing. They're financially solvent, doing very well. I think they're the 48th most valuable franchise in all of the world. That says a lot. They've got the potential to keep they can keep the band together if they really want to. And again, that I think we're going to want them to because there's a lot of promise on this team. There's a lot of really good young talent that's going to command premium prices. It might cost them here or there, but keeping that young core together is clearly a priority, and they have the means to do it.
And just so folks are aware, the reason we talk about the TV deal and the revenue, it's a percentage of the revenue that comes in that the owners are required by the collective bargaining agreement to spend, and that's where the salary cap number comes from. So all good stuff for the Browns, all important. Now, the other thing is Forbes wrote an article about the business plan that Andrew Berry has, kind of locking up, they call them pillars of their building, to early extensions. Again, it's very good business. It's what the Indians did in the 90s that has kind of become the model for baseball.
It really is. It is sort of the Moneyball phenomenon. Paul DePodesta, he was in the movie. Thanks, Jonah Hill. He's now with the Browns, and you can see the influence from it. They are doing things differently than some other NFL teams have, and different in this case is good. It has allowed them to lock up Myles Garrett before he hit the super premium level. Imagine the season that we all expect him to have this year and trying to sign him to a new contract after that. Then you're looking at making bigger cuts because even the balloon that will come with the increase in the salary cap isn't going to cover that if you also want to pay Baker and Chubb and Denzel and some other players. So yeah, the fact that they saw ahead and there's a plan, like you said, you can see the roadmap of where they want to be and how they're going to get there. And they have a very good idea of what they need to spend on each player. I think they have a pretty good idea of the valuations and the market flow for those players. And if it behooves them to sign them early, and certainly it did in Myles' case, they're going to do it. And that's why I do expect some activity on the contract extension front this offseason. Might not be this week, might not be next week. It might be, after the final preseason game as you're leading into the season. That Labor Day weekend tends to be a busy one for the contract extension things, especially after preseason. People have a good idea of, okay, I think we're good here. And I can see that happening with at least one of the players that's going to have their hands out this year.
How important is, the financial, just the whole mindset and the way they have set up the pieces to sustaining any type of success that they're able to have?
Oh, that's critical because, again, you can't pay Myles Garrett so much that you're going to lose Baker Mayfield. And you can't pay Baker and Myles and lose Nick Chubb and Denzel Ward, and not be able to replace them with other things. One of the reasons why Sheldon Richardson was cut was because it did save them a significant amount of money, and it allows them to have some flexibility with that. Would you rather pay Sheldon Richardson at the age he's at for another year, or would you rather devote that money, be it in a cap rollover or even this offseason, to paying and locking up Baker Mayfield or Nick Chubb before they hit the high market value? And I think that's sort of the football economics that they're dealing with. And yeah, it's important to do it that way because, again, if you overspend on players and locking them up early, or wait too long and then have to franchise tag them even, as what Minnesota has done with Kirk Cousins as an example, that gets prohibitively expensive, and that can wreck a team. And the Browns are in very good shape in avoiding that. And that's part of the Berry plan, the DePodesta plan. And like you said, it does trace back to the Indians in the 90s and some of the other baseball teams. And it's interesting to see how that has infiltrated the NFL, which there never used to be player trades in the NFL. There used to the way things have changed over the years, where they don't have the rookie bonus babies anymore, where the number one pick in the draft isn't the highest paid player on his team anymore. They are on the cusp of that revolution. It's a great place to be. It's better to be on top of that wave than crashing under it.
Jeff Risdon from BrownsWire.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll get to Jeff's impressions of rookies from the rookie minicamp. We'll talk some OTAs, and we will also take a look at roster evolution. Browns roster as it stands now might not be what it looks like come opening game. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns football with BrownsWire.com's Jeff Risdon. Jeff, rookie minicamp wrapped up in Berea a couple days ago. Impressions and expectations from this rookie class?
I think what you're looking at, the rookie minicamp is just a chance to get these guys in front of the coaches. That they're doing 7-on-7. There's no contact. They're not even in full pads. So you're not getting a lot of oh, this guy can definitely play and this guy definitely can't. You're not getting any of that. This is more about just getting comfortable, sort of the coaching staff telling the players what the expectations will be. And, I think you see I think that you see how Greg Newsome fits in as the outside cornerback. He's certainly going to get a lot of run and a lot of chance to prove himself. Where I was really interested was guys like Demetric Felton, who I think is going to be the return man for the Browns. He's certainly going to get that opportunity, but how does he fit in? He's a running back, but he also played wide receiver. They have to see what he does, where he fits in. They have a chance to look at him in person now. Remember, they weren't able to scout these guys in person. In a lot of cases, they haven't met these people in person before. So that's what this past weekend was about, or a couple weekends ago when they had the rookies in. It's a chance for them to get in uniform, see how they look, get a full feel for it. But it's important for the players that have some flexibility like that. Where does Newsome fit? Does he fit outside? Is he going to start in the slot? Where is he comfortable? Is he more comfortable on the left? Is he on the right? You get a feel for how he's going to move around and how he sees things. So that's what that was all about. And it's always good to get them back in. It was nice for them to be in person this year because last year they didn't get that opportunity. So in that sense, they're already ahead of where they were a year ago in terms of getting the rookies worked in. Now that's true of every other team as well, obviously. But it's great that they're back, that there's football back in Berea, and that we as the media will be allowed to get in there and watch it again. That's something that's been restricted for the past year. Just all in all, it's really fun to have them back, and you've got things coming up where the Browns may or may not be in. We'll see about that, but getting a feel for where the guys are, how they will respond to the coaching, how they interact with one another. We saw it a couple of years ago when Taki and Mac Wilson came in together playing roughly the same position. They bonded right away, and they were a fun, odd couple to follow. You're starting to see the seeds planted for who's going to be this year's group of guys that really get together and gel. And I think that's one of the fun things that you learn in this part of the offseason.
Which of the rookies you think has the chance to make the biggest impact in his rookie season?
I lean towards Newsome just because I think he's going to play a lot. I think he's going to wind up starting. Greedy Williams will certainly have something to say about that, but that's the expectation anyways. And, I actually do. I think Felton has a real chance to make an impact on this team, certainly as a returner. I think he's primarily competing against Donovan Peoples-Jones. One of the knocks or books on Donovan Peoples-Jones coming out of Michigan was you either need to make him a receiver or a return man. Don't ask him to do both. And I think we saw a little bit of that in his rookie season, quite honestly. And I think Felton is a guy. Look, he has some fun tape at UCLA. He also has some real limitations to what he can do as both a receiver and a runner. You're trying to find a guy who didn't really have a position in college. Now you're trying to find a spot for him. I think that return gig is big for him. That's a place where the Browns need to get better. They haven't really been all that successful with a solidified return man in some time. That role is his for the taking, and that might be the meatiest role that any player outside of Newsome gets it as a rookie.
When you look at OTAs coming up, Browns are going to go virtual with them. Is it an advantage for other teams that will have the in-person? Browns certainly did just fine with the virtual OTAs a season ago.
They did. This year, though, that there are going to be other teams that are meeting in person, I do think that impacts chemistry. It's different when you're in front of someone than when you're on a Zoom with them. You just get a different dynamic. You get plus you get the smell of the grass altogether. You pick up on the coach's body language a little bit better and things like that. I don't think it's a great disadvantage for them, but it could be better if they were in person. Let's put it that way. And I think there are some teams, specifically younger teams that don't necessarily know what they have yet. For those teams, I think it's a much bigger advantage to get together. The Browns, they're bringing back everybody on offense. I think as offensively, this team will be fine working virtually. You've seen Baker working out with guys, Jarvis and guys are getting together and working out this offseason. I don't think there's going to be any chemistry issues there. But when you've got as many as 9 new starters on defense, any chance that you can get to line up shoulder to shoulder with a guy instead of shoulder to shoulder via Zoom, I think that's an advantage. So I do think it sets them back just a little bit. But again, this is a professional group. You have to trust your coaching staff. So far, everything we've seen from Kevin Stefanski and Joe Woods on the defensive side of the ball is that they know what they're doing. They understand what buttons to push. They understand how to manage people pretty well. So I would be more concerned if there were not as much talent on the roster, but these guys know what they're doing. So it's a little suboptimal, but not enough that it's like, oh no, we're really behind the 8 ball because we're not doing it.
You also wrote an article about rosters evolving through the course of training camp, the season to the end of the season. Take us through that and just how different you think the Browns roster could potentially look.
Yeah, and it was something that Andrew Berry said on the Ross Tucker podcast. I'll give him credit for it, talking about how the roster right now might not look the same. And he brought up any number of variables. Somebody will get hurt. Somebody will get traded around the league. The reactions to what happens around the league. Maybe a player. Remember a year ago, we were worried about Wyatt Teller. And, what's that right guard going to look like? The rest of the line looks pretty good. Teller wound up being outstanding last year. Well, what if he isn't this year? These are the contingency plans that they have to have. What if Chris Hubbard winds up being a cap casualty, and that could happen as the extra tackle. Kendall Lamb is gone now. Do we have to find an extra tackle from somewhere? What if God forbid Kareem Hunt gets hurt? Do we have people in house? Can Demetri Felton step into that role? Does Ernest Johnson, is he able to step up in that? Or do we need to find something outside? And I think that's more of what Barry was talking about there. He wasn't talking like, we've got to bring in people. I'm not happy with the roster now. That's not what he was saying. He was just saying that you've got to understand that you need plan Bs and plan Cs, because plan A, expecting that to last through now 17 games in 18 weeks, it's just unrealistic. Things are going to happen that are going to force their hand, and they're going to be open and ready for it, which goes back to what we just talked about with the salary cap. They have the ability financially to do whatever they need to do to make those sorts of moves that are forced upon them within the season.
BrownsWire.com's Jeff Risdon and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, is Baker Mayfield the top 10 quarterback in the NFL? We'll discuss that. Plus, how aggressive is Kevin Stefanski when fourth down occurs for the Browns? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football. Marcellus Wiley from Speak for Yourself talking about, is Baker Mayfield a top 10 quarterback in the NFL?
Let me say this for real. When you ask me, just general, we hanging out, is Baker Mayfield a top 10 quarterback? I start to think, he's teenish, if not top 10. But then I got to do my homework. I got to do my analysis.
Fair.
I start looking at this list and I start saying by name, not by number, by name, is Baker Mayfield a top 10 quarterback? Then I say no. Justin Herbert is not in the top 10. Justin Herbert, to me, already is better than Baker Mayfield. Say what you want about it. I'll tell you why. Because Baker Mayfield is Mr. Consistently Inconsistent. Here's the thing that really keeps Baker Mayfield out of my love affair in terms of the quarterback position. There are three great abilities to a coach. What's the first greatest ability to a coach?
You want to go availability?
No, ability.
Okay.
You ain't on my team. How about this? We won't have you on my team if you're not good enough. Second one is availability. Once you're on the team, are you going to be on the field? Okay. And the last one is, since you're on the team and you're on the field, reliability. I got to know I could trust you. And that's my issue with Baker Mayfield. I'm not so certain I could trust Baker Mayfield. He was not the driver of that team last year. That team was driven by all pros and pro bowlers up front, tight end position, wide receiver position, dynamic duo in the running game. That drove this bus. So when you say top 10 to me that means who's the bus drivers of their team. And for that reason alone, I'm trying to strip away the spice unless you force me to. I don't see Baker Mayfield as a top 10 quarterback.
Let's bring back in Jeff Risdon from BrownsWire.com. Jeff, there's some truth to what he says, but my counter to that would be Baker Mayfield has never been in the same system. So the reliability and trust factor, let's see this year. That would be my answer. I think he's borderline top 10. Some of what he says is true, but I think there's underlying circumstances to it.
Yeah, I understand his criticism, and I think it's mostly fair. I do think that it takes away from some of what Baker did last year. I think he was more than just the bus driver. I think there were times where he was a very good one of those. Again, there was some weird weather last year. We all remember the Raiders game where you couldn't throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field because it was basically a hurricane. There's a lot of things with it. I do think that, and this is just a general national perception of Baker, is he was really good as a rookie. He was not so good in his second season. And then the third season, again, he's with a coach that was a very friendly scheme, not just for him, but for all quarterbacks. I think we've seen Kirk Cousins be a better quarterback in Minnesota in the same sort of system than he was when he was in Washington. It is a QB-friendly system. It's the same thing that you deal with the Shanahan legacy out in San Francisco now and in Atlanta with Matt Ryan. I think Matt Ryan was better than normal when he was in a more QB-friendly system. But Matt Ryan's still a really darn good quarterback. I would put him and Baker Mayfield right in the same tier. Without going through in the mental Rolodex of the top 10, Baker's real close to that if he's not there. And I understand that there would be reservations, okay, go ahead and prove it. But I think Baker will prove it this year. I think just the way he controls the team. And I know that there's some strong personalities on the team with Juice and but he is, and OBJ and getting him back and how that chemistry works. And I do think there's an inherent bias that's a little bit out there. And I think we in Cleveland have a better idea that it's kind of bogus, was that, well, Odell and Baker didn't really work together. And I think a lot of the blame winds up being placed on Baker, when I don't necessarily think that it's that case. There was just a lot of weird circumstances with that, with Odell not being healthy, with not being able to work, with them both learning new offenses that were very different from what they had experienced before that. I give that a little bit more of a pass than I think what Wiley and some others are doing that wanted. And again, I don't think Marcellus is dissing Baker, but I do think he's underplaying how good Baker is on his own.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing I would say, part of being a good coach is putting your quarterback in a system where he can be successful. That, by definition, that's what coaching is. So good that somebody's finally putting Baker Mayfield in a system to be successful as an NFL quarterback.
Right, and he gets another year in it. I think this will be a very telling year. If Baker does this year what he did last year, nobody's going to be counting him outside the top 10. They're going to be wondering, how high up does he go? Because remember, there's some guys above him on that list. Deshaun Watson, very tenuous, let's say, how he's going to play, if he plays at all this season. Matt Ryan's getting older. There's some other guys up there. Tom Brady, he could be at the end of his run, though. Who knows? What's going on with Aaron Rodgers? Will he be back in Green Bay? Will he go to another team? Will he fit in there? Who knows what's going on with all that? There's upward mobility for Baker, and I think what we've seen is that his floor was what we had in 2019 under Freddie Kitchens, which was not a good coaching situation. It was an oil and water situation in terms of what Baker does well versus what Freddie wanted him to do. And I do think that stain sort of lingers on Baker a little bit. I think he's going to erase it this year. I think this conversation will look real fun a year from now after Baker is having another strong season where he probably should be in Pro Bowl contention in the AFC with some of the players around him. There's some good young quarterbacks, no doubt about it. Josh Allen's really good. Justin Herbert, took Baker's rookie touchdown record. You got to respect that. But guys like Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill, they're in that range where there are weeks where they're better than Baker and there are weeks when they're not. And I think you're going to see more not this year because Baker's going to raise his play with the familiarity that he has and all again, it's a great team around him. And he sure seems like he's the right guy to drive that bus. And that's all we can ask for right now.
One more thing before I let you go. You wrote an article about Kevin Stefanski and his aggressiveness on fourth down. Take me through that, what you found, and what you make of it.
Yeah, so Football Outsiders did a study on all the coaches and how often they went for it on fourth down outside of like obvious situations, where you're losing by 10 points and it's 4th and 18 and you have to go for it. And only 3 coaches were more aggressive than Kevin Stefanski at going for it in the quote-unquote game-neutral situations. They had 18 total, 11 of them qualified. 11 opportunities of going for it instead of punting. Some of that is a function of maybe you don't necessarily trust your punter. But it's also the analytics will tell you, and if you ever have conversations with football analytics folks, they will tell you, please go for it more on fourth down. Even if it's 4th and 2 from your own 30, you're better off going for it than punting in most situations. And Kevin Stefanski seems to embrace that. That's where there is an analytical bent to this team. They employ more people in their front office analytics than any other franchise, and they're using it to prove that you should, in fact, be more aggressive. And what they will tell you, what the analysts at Football Outsiders conclude is, even if you go for it and you fail, you're still making the right decision rather than punting it away, because there are too many variables that could happen with a punt. You could get a holding penalty. You could have a block. You could have give up a return and give up field position. So the Browns are on the leading edge of another thing there about going for it on fourth down, and I think you're going to see that happen more and more around the league. Last year, teams went for it at a record pace than ever before, and I think that's only going to accelerate. And again, the Browns are on the front line of that with Kevin Stefanski and the analytical bent for this team. And it's interesting because those of us who are a little bit older, we grew up like, oh my goodness, if 4th and 3 from your own 35, yeah, you better punt. Well, that's not the way the NFL sees things anymore, and that's where the Browns are at now.
Jeff Risdon from BrownsWire.com. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, Jeff Risdon from BrownsWire.com. We'll step aside, take a quick time out. When we return, we'll talk a little bit more Browns with Daryl Ruiter from 92.3 The Fan. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We're going to continue talking Browns. Let's welcome in one of the hardest working guys in town, Daryl Ruiter. He is the Cavs. He is the Browns. He is the Indians beat reporter for 92.3 The Fan. Daryl, as always, appreciate the time. Let's start off talking some Browns. NFL.com has listed dark horse MVP candidates for the upcoming season. One of them, defensive end Myles Garrett. Do you buy that? Do you like that? Can you see that?
It's a little bit of a surprise. If my memory serves me correctly, Lawrence Taylor was the last defensive player to win the NFL's MVP award. So I don't see it happening unless Myles Garrett just has a historical once-in-a-lifetime type of season. And that's nothing against Myles. It's just the precedent for the NFL MVP is it always goes usually to an offensive player, most notably the best quarterback that particular year. So sure, should Myles Garrett be in the conversation for NFL MVP? Absolutely. I think more defensive players should. There should be defensive players that actually win that award. But over the last 25 to 30 years, that award tends to go to the best offensive player. And as you know, that tends to be a quarterback.
Yeah, without question. And to your point, Lawrence Taylor, Alan Page of the Vikings, the only two defense players that have ever won it. But it's still interesting. It tells you, Myles Garrett was on his way to having a great season last year, and then, the COVID whole thing kind of caught him, and he just couldn't shake that.
Yeah, and I still believe he's going to break the franchise sack record for a single season. Now, granted, that only goes back to the 80s when they first started counting sacks as a legitimate statistic, but I still think he's going to hit that 14 mark at some point. He was on pace basically for 16 sacks, a sack per game last year before he got COVID, and that derailed his season. Unfortunately, early in his career, he's had some things, some within his control, some things out of his control that have kind of derailed his ability to break that record. But I still think he's going to do it. They added Jadeveon Clowney to that defensive front this offseason, along with a couple other faces. So I think, it's setting up this year to be the perfect year for him to break that record.
And, one of the guys that you're talking about, in addition to Clowney, that they added is on this next topic that we have. So Bleacher Report came out with former first-round picks from 2017 to 2019 that have the ability to shed the quote-unquote bust label, and among those, Takk McKinley, the edge rusher that the Browns signed as free agent.
Yeah, he's on a one-year deal, so it's a prove-it deal. And he was brought in to be given just an opportunity, that low risk, high reward type of signing for Andrew Berry. And we saw him take this approach last offseason with several players who did not return this year. And we saw it once again this offseason. Very few players got long-term deals as free agents. And I think that this is kind of part of Berry's strategy. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they use McKinley, how he's going to fit in Joe Woods' defense. Is he going to be a package player? Can be an everyday, an every down player. I kind of think, obviously, bringing in Jadeveon Clowney, that certainly changes his outlook as far as his playing time goes, because it stands to reason that Clowney is going to be the guy that gets, the bulk of the playing time opposite of Myles Garrett. But it was an opportunistic signing by Berry, and we'll see what McKinley's able to do in his first and, hopefully not last, but at least right now, as far as the contract goes, it's setting up to be his only season here in Cleveland, but we'll have to wait and see how the season plays out.
Would it surprise you if he, kind of rebounded to – he had a couple of years where he had 7 sacks with Atlanta, and then kind of, he admitted, kind of got lost, if you will, in his professional way, and said all the right things when they brought him to town.
Well, they all do, right?
Yeah, good point. Fair enough.
The nature of free agency. They tend to win the press conference right out of the gate, or the Zoom call. But yeah, he was pretty candid in his assessment of the early stages of his career, and not only his approach, but the things that derailed things for him down in Atlanta last year. Some injuries were a problem that led to him kind of bouncing around a little bit. So he's kind of looking for some stability, and he's got to earn that stability. And again, that's why I really like the signing, because I view it as it's minimal risk on the part of the Browns. And, they're the ones that are going to reap the big rewards if he's able to get it together and have a big year, because if that happens, that means that the Cleveland Browns have had themselves a pretty big year as well.
Daryl Ruiter, a Browns beat reporter, as well as Cavs and Indians beat reporter for 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We're still talking Browns on the other side of the break. Who Daryl sees as some guys competing for roster spots, trying to hang on to them. We'll also take a look at a Sports Illustrated projected trade. Could be interesting. And we'll see what Daryl thinks about Sheldon Richardson. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns with 92.3 The Fan. Browns beat reporter Daryl Ruiter. Daryl, when you look at this roster upgrade is pretty significant. Who do you see as guys that have to come in and compete to try to hang on to their spots? Some guys you'll just be keeping an eye out for.
Well, I think the most notable position group is going to be wide receiver. It is a packed room, and everybody is back. And they added a receiver in the draft, too. So I think that adds an intriguing element. So if you play wide receiver and your name is not Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones, or Odell Beckham Jr., you're going to have to come to camp and be ready to compete for a job. I think obviously Rashard Higgins, he's fairly safe, so I'll mention him as well. But if you're below those four guys, there's only 2 roster spots available. So I certainly think that wide receiver is going to be at least the back end of that position group is going to be compelling to watch come training camp. And then backup offensive line, who's going to fit in and be the swing tackle, the swing interior lineman. Defensive, I guess I also should probably, mention running back, because there are going to be some familiar names that are not going to make the team, like Ernest Johnson. I don't know that he makes this football team this year. Looking, you got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Obviously, are your 1 and 2 guys, but behind him, they added Demetric Felton in the draft. It stands to reason they're going to keep their draft picks. So I think that squarely puts Ernest Johnson on the bubble. On the defensive side of the ball, I think that they're pretty well set. They really needed to bolster that side of the ball, and that's exactly what Andrew Berry did through free agency and through the draft. So I don't know that there's many familiar names on that side of the ball that you're just going to be like completely shocked if somebody gets cut. But both sides, I think the starting 11's pretty much spoken for.
Would you be surprised if someone like Mack Wilson or Sione Takitaki was involved in one of those roster battles? They had a couple linebackers, and I know they like both of them, and they're only in their 3rd year, I think it is.
Right, yeah. It wouldn't surprise me, because clearly if the Browns were happy with that position, they would not have gone out and did what they did this offseason as far as bolstering that group. They signed Anthony Walker in free agency. They drafted a couple of guys, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who I really, really like and believe has a chance to be a 3-down linebacker because of his versatility. Tony Fields II, they added him in the draft as well. So, yeah, I certainly, Sione Takitaki and Mack Wilson, they are on notice that their roster spots and their playing time certainly is not guaranteed.
All right, let's move on to another topic, and this one's kind of a head-scratcher, but we'll discuss it. Sports Illustrated's Pete Smith. The Browns could trade for Julio Jones. Suggests they may be willing to give up a draft pick or 2, potentially restructure Jarvis Landry's contract, and that might be a move that potentially pushes them over the top, if you will.
So that means they're trading Odell, right? Because there's just no room. There's no room. I realize that there's no such thing as having too many good players, Dave, but in this case, there's no room. There really isn't. And there's also no reason to make a trade like that. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, you're looking for a first-round pick. Now, granted, the Browns and Andrew Berry, I think, would be willing to move a future first-round pick if it nets them a player that, quote-unquote, pushes them over the top. But their needs right now for that would probably be on the defensive side of the ball. I firmly believe that they're 100% behind Odell Beckham Jr. I do believe that they'll try and restructure either Odell's deal or Jarvis's deal or both of those deals at some point to try and keep those guys around, because let's be honest about it, when you get to 2022 and the roster management stuff kicks in with your salary cap, and obviously this year it was lower, don't know what it's going to look like for 2022. Both of those players slated to make around $15 million per year each. That's $30 million invested in one position just among two players. Yeah, economically, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. I don't know where the Browns would have any room for that type of a trade and why that would make any sense whatsoever for the Browns to even consider pursuing it.
Yeah, that kind of was where I was going with it. All right. Last thing we'll talk about with the Browns, Sheldon Richardson. Obviously, they did they released him to save the salary and roll that over, potentially salary cap. He has only been tied with the Lions, Saints, and Chargers. Is there a scenario where you see Sheldon Richardson could be returning to the Browns? Just your thoughts on that.
I don't see him returning to the Browns just because their actions indicate that they don't have room for him. I mean, they went in and brought 4 defensive tackles in after releasing him. So that does not speak to me like they're just hoping he's going to come back for a couple $1 million a year. Keep in mind, he was slated to make $12 million in 2021. And so they recoup most of that in cap savings that they can roll over into next year with all these contract extensions they still have to negotiate and whatnot. I don't. Looking at the defensive tackle spot, you got Jordan Elliott, Andrew Billings, who opted out last year. He's back now, so they're going to look at him. They drafted Tommy Togiai out of Ohio State. They certainly will want to get a look at him. Malik Jackson. They've got a lot of guys in that defensive tackle room right now that I think that the Browns internally as an organization have moved on from Sheldon Richardson. Anytime they're asked, whether it's Kevin Stefanski or Andrew Berry, they obviously will leave the door open. I'd just like to remind everyone that press conferences, Zoom conferences, and radio interviews are not sworn testimony.
Daryl Ruiter, a beat reporter for the Browns, as well as the Cavs and the Indians. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we shift our focus a little bit. We'll start talking some Indians baseball. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. Time to check in with the voicemail of truth and reason. This one involves the Indians.
What do the Indians need to do to, spark, to win more games? What's the take on it? What do they need to do to, produce runs, to beat teams? How to rebuild, from the Francisco Lindor trade? How can they bounce back from that? What are going to be the takes? Is Tito going to bring in more guys from AAA? There's these guys at AAA that are very good, and they're producing, and they're making runs. Why aren't we getting guys from AAA? Why aren't we calling these guys up? Jake Bowers should be basically gone. He should be at AAA. We should be calling guys up to take first base and so on. That's my question. If y'all could reply back, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
All right, let's bring back in Daryl Ruiter, who is also the Indians and Cavs beat reporter, in addition to the Browns beat reporter for 92.3 The Fan. All right, Daryl, so Jake Bowers has not had a great season. However, he has started to hit the ball a little better as of late. I need to point out the Columbus Clippers, other than Owen Miller, they're not hitting the ball either. Bobby Bradley's hitting under 200 down at AAA. Bowers has hit 250 in his last 7. They're giving him a chance, but he's just not taking advantage of it in my eyes.
Yeah, and Bobby Bradley's supposed to be the savior, right? For the Indians, everyone's waiting for him, and like you said, he's not knocking the cover off the ball at AAA. Look, I understand some of the angst and the frustration among fans. They're above 500. They're in contention in the division. Their rotation is performing well. The back end of the bullpen, for the most part, is doing a great job. I think that they've done a pretty good job retooling on the fly. If they weren't doing that, they'd be in the basement of the division, and they'd be 10 games under 500 already and out of contention. So just to answer that point about why can't they rebuild, why can't they retool after trading Francisco Lindor, I think that they've done a fairly nice job of that. I don't know that there's a savior out there. Part of the issue with AAA too is, I got 2 words for you: service time. That, whether you like it or not, that is a factor with small market baseball teams, is they don't want that clock to start too soon and start ticking faster, because the earlier they call a guy up, well, that's the earlier that player becomes a free agent. And it's one of the worst things about baseball, but it is a factor in the decision-making process. And that is why you saw the team structured the way it was coming out of spring training. Yeah, and it's very fair. Now, Owen Miller is hitting 479. He's averaging almost 2 hits a game. The challenge with Owen Miller, he's not on the 40-man roster. So when we say that, what that means is they have to get somebody off of the 40-man roster, designate him for assignment, basically give up on him. They weren't ready to do that with Jake Bowers. So they basically have to DFA somebody if they want to bring Owen Miller up. So that's a challenge. Yep. Yeah, and it's easy for us to sit and talk about, but these are the things that Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff are thinking about on a daily basis. And, while we have these conversations, while fans certainly have the conversation and express their frustration over the offensive output and the inconsistencies that we have seen so far this season, look, buckle up. This is the way it's going to be. They're going to go from being no hit one night to putting up 10 runs the next night. That's just the nature of the beast that the Indians are dealing with this year. So there is no quick fix. I don't think that there's a player out there that you can just go trade for. I know that there were some fans that when Albert Pujols was released, they were like, oh, go sign Albert Pujols. Well, first of all, he signed with the Dodgers, so he didn't have to move, which totally makes sense. And also, too, many a former GM would say to me, there's a reason a player is available. And the good players typically are not made available within any particular season. So there's not a quick fix when it comes to the Indians. There's not just one magic guy to call up from AAA. There's not a single trade out there that's going to push them over the top. I think that this is the ball club is what the ball club is. And I think Terry Francona is doing the best he can to squeeze as much out of this roster as he can. And quite frankly, again, the Indians are above 500. and they're in the thick of the AL Central race, which is a place that I did not think they would be this year.
Yeah, and that's fair. They need an upgrade. They need to upgrade the offense at first base. They need another bat. You live with what you get from catcher because they're doing a great job defensively, calling games and doing those things. The other thing that is very interesting, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, baseball, Major League Baseball has become home run or out, and it's the major league average. The major league average for a hitter is something like 234, which is, that's not very good. Take a listen to Terry Francona just about that.
Well, I think it's more that, this certainly would bring attention to it, which sometimes that helps. But I just think the way, it didn't get this way in a day or a season, and it's probably not going to get completely fixed that way either. I don't know that there is a fix like that quickly. I think approach to hitting has certainly evolved, and depending on how you view it, maybe not for the better. Again, I'm probably more old school than most in this particular instance, but I just think there's so much to be appreciated by guys using the whole field, and an advantage too, I think. I understand hitting home runs is great, but when hitters use the whole field, you're so much harder to defend. And it just, and I think guys grow into power as they learn their swing and they learn their body and they learn the leg. And, I think sometimes we're got the cart before the horse.
And Daryl, I know you have opinions about this, so take it away on this one.
I call it macho ball, and it's not good for Major League Baseball at all. Here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So Shohei Ohtani, we know he's basically Babe Ruth reincarnate. It's incredible. He can throw 100 miles an hour and be a Cy Young candidate, and he could potentially hit 50 home runs. The other night, he saw the third baseman was playing back. And instead of swinging for the fences, he laid down a bunt. And he beat it out for a hit, easy peasy, at first base. And I think more players need to do stuff like this. How do you beat a shift? You don't try and pound the ball through the infield. Lay down a bunt and walk into second base when there's nobody on the left or the right side of the infield. You do that one or two times, guess what? They're not going to be in a hurry to stack four guys over to one side of the infield. So I think that this macho man approach of you're not paying to see me bunt, people pay to see me hit home runs. Well, home runs are nice, but when you're hitting 230 and you're not driving in runs at critical junctures of the game, it's no wonder there's so many no-hitters. You got too many guys that are just swinging for the fences, and that their pride refuses to allow them to do anything other than try and yank a ball and smash it through a shift. And that's just extremely hard to do. So my solution is simple: bunt. It's not difficult. If there's nobody playing third base and short because they're all on the right side of the infield, push a bunt into left field. You're going to walk to second base with a double because everyone's chasing the ball. So that's my solution. And it's not perfect. It's not sexy. It's not exciting, but it's effective.
All right, last thing before we let you go. So top three in the Indians rotation, Savali, Plesac, and of course Bieber have been great. 4 and 5 have been a struggle. Back end of the bullpen has been great. Can you see a scenario where the Indians try to piece it together and just get to that 6th inning? Because if you get to the 6th inning with the lead with what they've got out there, you're going to win a huge majority of the games you do that.
Yeah, McKenzie and Henschers, they've struggled. No question about it. They've had their ups and downs. But look, if 3/5 of my rotation I know is money, and we're a little spoiled in Cleveland because we've watched the Indians rotation over the years where it's 1 through 5. Each and every time what you're going to get. You're going to get 6 quality innings and then turn it over to the bullpen. And like you were talking about, Dave, it's smooth sailing from there. I think that those young pitchers can grow into their roles, and this is again part of that evolution of roster building and retooling. You got to suck it up and be patient with some of these young arms and live through their struggles. Terry Francona has talked about it quite a bit already. early in the season, the ups and downs and peaks and valleys. And you just got to ride the waves with some of these young guys. I think that they're going to be fine. But again, we're a little spoiled because we're used to 1 through 5 in that rotation being perfect. But you ask any major league GM, if you give them 3 quality starters that you're getting 7 innings out of them every time, and they're going to give up anywhere from 1 to 3 runs, they're going to take that any time, and they'll deal with positions 4 and 5 in that rotation as it comes.
Daryl Ruiter from 92.3 The Fan, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Daryl. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dave. Good talking to you.
All right, Daryl Ruiter, Browns, Cavs, and Indians beat reporter for 92.3 The Fan. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you again tomorrow. Scheduled guests, Mark Munch-Bishop, Doug Lesmerises. We'll see you again right here at 4 o'clock on Sports for CLE. Have a great night, everyone.